Hello, this is Sandeep, and you are watching 6 Issues with XT200, that is Fuji XT200. Before we get into my 6 issues with Fuji XT200, let's look at who's this camera for. If you are looking at getting into Fuji's system and you want to understand and explore the color science and other things which are associated with Fuji system, then this is a good entry-level camera. If you're looking at a mirrorless camera with interchangeable lens at a cheaper price, probably this is also your camera. And if you have skipped upgrading from XT1 to XT2, XT3, or XH1, or any of the XT2030 series of cameras, then yes, this is also a camera which you can think about upgrading. Of course, it does not have the X-trans sensor, but it does have a very good sensor which you can use, and it also comes with Fuji's color science, which is fantastic. And as we know that Fuji's photographs are really fantastic, so we don't need to think twice about thinking about this camera, whether to go for this camera or not. Now, if you're also looking for a camera for YouTube, then definitely this is another camera for you because it's got a faster autofocus and also takes good pictures. So you can shoot a very good video without having to do color correction or color grading post shooting the video and directly post it to YouTube. And this is a camera fantastic for that purpose. And also, if you want to have a camera which is light and easy for traveling, which can take good photos, and it can also take some of your video, then yes, this is a camera for you. Now, having said this, this camera is not perfect, and I have few issues with it. That's what this video is all about. So let's get into the issues of this camera. The first one, the major thing which is missing in this camera, I feel, is the manual autofocus and the continuous shooting mode lever, which is available on most of the other cameras. I've given a comparison picture of XT4 at the bottom just to compare the two cameras. But the major advantage of having this one is that you can change this autofocus from manual to continuous or single shoot just by flicking of this lever. And this kind of helps you whenever your autofocus fails, or for some reason you want to focus on something and the autofocus is looking somewhere else, then this kind of helps you fine tune that focus, which is required for you to get that correct focus for the picture. So that is missing in this camera, which I believe it must be easy for Fuji to fix this. Of course, not through firmware update, but a physical change maybe in XT300 or 200S or whatever is coming next. I would request you to add that to this. That will definitely help and lure more photographers to come to this price point and this camera. The second issue which I have with this particular camera is the dials and their customizability. If you see the bottom XT4 picture compared to the XT200, the XT200 has a dial on the top left corner here showcased in red. And this particular dial is for some reason locked by firmware only for previewing the film simulations, that is the Provia, Velvia, and those kind of things, which I feel is a big drawback for this camera because a person who this camera is aimed at is an entry-level photographer, and he will not be using this camera to watch and preview the different types of film simulations while he's clicking the picture. He will most probably put everything on auto and start clicking the pictures. So this one, probably the knob is getting wasted here. Instead, what I would request is Fuji is to help through upgrade of firmware that you can customize it to either shutter speed or ISO or something like that, which can be a one dial or one button feature or one dial feature, so that I can just flip this dial and make this into an easy option to change ISO or shutter speed. This does work for changing shutter speed in video mode, but in stills mode, I'm not sure why they didn't give that feature. So this is something which I think Fuji can do that quickly with the firmware update, and I would definitely request Fuji to do that. The second issue which I have with the Fujifilm is, or rather the third issue which I have with the Fujifilm XT200 is none of the dials can be assigned to ISO. So this is something which is a little bit cumbersome when I'm looking at the different types of dials here. None of these dials can be assigned to ISO. I can definitely have a button assigned to ISO, one of these two buttons or one of the touchscreen buttons to ISO. After clicking that button, I can use this button here to change the ISO on this camera. But there is no direct assignment. I cannot assign this button, or this button directly to change ISO, which is a little bit bummer for me because here, if you see, it's got the PASM mode. It's a jog dial for that mode. And when you're moving here, if I'm keeping it at aperture priority, the only thing I am changing is the aperture, and I would leave the camera to control everything else. But at the same time, if I'm able to set this dial or this dial or any one of the dials for ISO, there is an easy option for me to control the ISO of this particular camera, which is missing here. Or maybe again, my request to Fujifilm, whether I'm running it in aperture priority or completely manual. If you can do a firmware update and give this option that I can customize this dial to the left hand side or any one of these dials to control the ISO, that will be fantastic. I think that will greatly enhance the feature set of this camera. Another big issue, or I would say one of the issues of this camera, is that uh, the on and off button is a button and not a lever. So this is another thing which I felt can be changed maybe in the next versions of the camera, because especially this camera, the button is kind of very flat to the surface, and you'll have to really see the button to press and depress it to make it on or off. And there's no, of course, I don't know if you can assign music or a sound to say that it's on or off, but it's very difficult to understand if it is on or off. So, and even if you're not looking at the camera, there's no way to tell that if you have actually accidentally pressed it on or pressed it off. And with a small battery like the one we have here in this, there's every chance that you'll drain out the battery without knowing it. So my suggestion is even smaller cameras, entry-level cameras by other brands, they give lever, and I don't think there is any need to go for a button here when you can actually put a lever which is really easy. Probably you can put a lever something similar to this somewhere here or here, and that will greatly increase the usability of this camera when compared to just putting a button. I think that this is a big letdown if you ask me, because the whole layout has been laid out so well, but this, just because of this button, it's kind of giving away the option of having that lever which can be switched on and off even without looking at the camera. Another issue with this camera is really plasticky. I understand at an entry level you want to make it as cheap as possible, but the camera really looks like a toy camera, and especially these two dials, if you want to rotate the exposure compensation dial, and I think this can be used as a shutter speed dial if you are in aperture priority mode or manual mode. Uh, the main problem with these two dials are this dial cannot be used or rotated with your thumb, which is a big bummer for me, because that means I'll have to hold my camera on the lens and position it in such a way and use two fingers to rotate this particular dial, which is a big issue, instead of just rotating using the thumb to rotate this particular dial. So which is a bit of a problem. I request Fujifilm to put better dials here. Even though it's an entry level camera, you have other camera manufacturers make something similar. And they put very good dials in this. The dials can look plasticky, no doubt about it, but making them so tight or making them unusable or making the user not be able to change the setting with the thumb is a big bummer. The same thing with this, you cannot change this with the index finger. You'll have to basically hold the camera in a different way, not the way you're shooting, to adjust or use this dial before you could change any kind of setting using this dial. So, um, I mean, this camera is fantastic, but looks plasticky. I don't mind. Looks like a toy camera. I do not mind that, but still, you cannot rotate the thumb dials to achieve the actual footage you want. That's a big bummer for me. My request to Fujifilm is, if you can improve on these two dials, that will be fantastic. Maybe for the next version, if you can do it for this one, even that will be fantastic. But if not, at least for the next versions of the camera, my request is, please look into these dials, make it usable by one hand or one finger. That would greatly increase the usability of this camera. Another issue which I have this with this camera is the two movie modes. So this camera has a jog dial setting for movie mode as shown by this arrow, and it's also got a dedicated movie record menu or movie record button. So what it does is basically in any of the modes, like in the photo modes, you just press this button, movie record button, and it starts recording your video. Or if you want to properly preview it and record, you'll have to jog this dial to this location and then use the shutter button to record the video, which is not bad. But since you are giving this button, what I was thinking is why not give a firmware update with this in such a way that if I'm in any of the photo modes, pressing this button would not actually start recording, but it would preview the movie because there may be some crops, there may be some changes which I want on the screen. Basically, movie layout will be different from the photo layout. I would want the movie layout to come up by just depressing this button once, and then depressing it back would basically kind of bring it back to the photo mode. So once we depress that, you can let the shutter button be used for recording the movie. I don't know why we have not done that. I would request Fujifilm if you can do that, that will be fantastic. I'm sure a lot of people would not like it, but that is a great way to record a movie than to just press it, assuming that everything is in place and it'll start recording movie at the same time. So these are some of my main issues with Fuji XT200. Some of them I feel can be done or can be fixed or updated with firmware updates, but some I think need physical changes to the camera. Hope Fuji is listening or looking at my video and taking my feedback. I'm sure there are other people who will give feedback on this and make this camera a wonderful camera to use both for photos and videos. If you like my video, please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching this video. Thank you.